This is an interview that we have been trying to make happen for a while, and I finally convinced Robert to join us. Full disclosures, as required, we are working with Power Engineering Services to find high quality technicians. But after you hear from Robert, I think you'll see why we chose to work with them. Joining us today is Robert DeMarce, CEO of Power Engineering Services, or PES for short. Robert is a case study in perseverance and showing what can be accomplished if you set your mind to it. He started his career as an artilleryman in the U.S. Army back in 2003, and more specifically, a multiple launch rocket systems crew member. After 8 years, Robert decided to pursue the Army 12P Prime Power MOS and served in that capacity until leaving the military in 2015. After leaving the Army, Robert leveraged the experience he gained in Prime Power and joined GE Energy Connections as a field engineer, working his way to senior field engineer before moving to Schneider and then ultimately PES, where he assumed a role as the field services manager. He progressed rapidly during his tenure, becoming the VP of Field Services, then VP of Operations, and was named CEO of February of this year. Robert does truly embody what can be accomplished from artilleryman to CEO. Robert, thanks for joining us. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, Mike, like you said, I joined the Army. I grew up in North Carolina, born in Fort Bragg. My dad was artillery actually when he was in the Army. Not that I knew much about him, but that's what he did, right? So 9/11 happened when I was a senior in high school. And as you know, living near an Army base, everybody's parents get called up and get deployed. I thought I'd go to college for a little bit, went for a semester, had a scholarship to a little small school in North Carolina and said, you know what, I'm ready to just go. Went down to the recruiting station. Next thing I know, I went to Fort Sill. Spent a good amount of my time in Oklahoma, a few deployments. Never went to Afghanistan, went to Iraq a few times. And after I realized I didn't want to keep doing artillery anymore, I went to reclass. Uh, Kind of a long story there, but ended up in Prime Power and made a career out of it. Didn't know the Army did stuff like that. So to me, I think that was a good opportunity for me, and I really enjoyed it. And I've enjoyed what's happened since then.
It's very cool. In quite the story, just to know that those were your beginnings to where you are now.
Yep.
And when you joined the Army, did you have any idea what you wanted to do when you got out, or were you thinking of staying until retirement, or was power even a part of the equation?
Nowhere in it. So I went down to the recruiting station. I initially, fun fact, talked to the Navy recruiter, was going to go to nuke school, went through, took all the tests I needed to take, passed everything. Navy recruiter, I don't know, maybe he was on, we call it PTO, maybe he was on leave or
Could
something.
be, could
And
be.
that Army recruiter said, hey, who are you looking for? And I was like, oh, I'm trying to join the Navy, go to nuke school. And he's like, let me talk to you about the Army. So somehow I went from going to nuke school to field artillery in the Army, but I shipped out like 2 weeks. I talked to the
That
Army
is
recruiter,
amazing.
turned around and shipped right out, and the rest was history. So had no intention of power, no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to get out of that sleepy little town in North Carolina, and honestly,
I
I've only been back
understand.
one time.
Came from a pretty similar circumstance, except I avoided that Army recruiter by the hair of my teeth on
Yeah,
that one. So
yeah.
it was close, but they have that hustle over there, and that's probably about right with the Navy recruiter. Well, it sounds like you definitely weren't aware of Prime Power until it came down to time to reclassify. So that kind of answered the next question I had: was were you aware of Prime Power? What kind of drove you towards Prime Power at that point? It sounds like there's more to unfold there.
Well, so fun fact, right? The Army and all of its greatness. I had been on two deployments and realized artillery wasn't going anywhere. But I enjoyed what I was doing. We were doing patrols, QRF. We did some detainee operations there for a little while. So one of the few people I reclassed to infantry, right? I was like, well, I'm doing artillery, not really doing that. They got me doing infantry every day. Might as well go do it, right? Get the fancy
Right.
blue cord and go do it. So what happens? Get deployed. I'm in the Army, got deployed, got a no report to infantry school because I was deployed. And the
Ah,
Army, in all of its infinite wisdom, was like, well, you missed your reporting date, so you can't go infantry anymore. So,
not mind you that you were deployed.
not at all, right? Hey, that's not our fault, right? Got to love the Army and all
Thank
its
you, Uncle
greatness, right?
Sam. I know it, man.
And then the career counselor said, "Hey, you got some pretty high ASVAB scores. Why don't you go take this basic math and science test and see if you can do prime power, and we'll get you in that." So I was like, "All right, let's go do it." The rest was history. And a lot of my prime power buddies are going to see this. And, the jokes are going to be coming. I know they're
Absolutely.
coming.
I
Uh,
know a couple of them that are waiting to light you up based on the interviews.
I know it's coming. But I was kind of the black sheep of prime power, believe it or not. Like when you ask these guys how I was in prime power, I'll put my disclaimer out now. I learned more in prime power than I ever thought I was learning when I was in it. Had no clue
Absolutely.
the opportunity that I had in front of me. But when I was in it, I was just like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to get out of
Were
here.
you the number one dirtbag? That's the
I
question.
wouldn't say I was the number one dirtbag. People, it depends on who you ask. I was definitely outspoken, but I did everything right. I got my hands in there. There's not a single person that worked with me that will tell you I didn't do the job. When
Gotcha.
it came time to test the generators, relays, whatever, I was there. I was doing it. I was mechanic.
Gotcha.
A lot of people don't know that about me. I went to mechanical school and got out of that, and I was testing relays in the substation,
That's
testing
awesome.
all the CPTs and breakers. I mean, I'm a relay guy, but I'm also a switchgear guy, a breaker
Gotcha.
guy, a PLC guy, motor guy. Whatever you need, I'll go do. And I attribute it to, and I'll touch on this a lot. I attribute it to I never stood back and let other people do what I could have done myself. I
Fair
never
enough.
did. I was never that guy. It always frustrated me to see people, and I see it now, right? People will say, "Oh, I know how to do X, Y, Z." They can talk the talk. They can tell you what to do, and then you just step back and ask them to do it. Deer in the headlights. And I never wanted to be that person. So
I
that's
like
what
it.
my motivating factor was. I've always been pretty kind of high speed. The military calls it. Good PT score, could shoot, could run, could whatever, right? Could do it all. So I've always been pretty proud of what I would do.
Right.
But like I said, I didn't know what I was learning when I was learning it. I really didn't know what the opportunity I had in front of me when I had it.
Now, while you were going through Prime Power, did you actually get your NITA certs, or was NITA even part of the picture at that point? Or were you
Nope.
thinking that far ahead?
I'll be honest. This is going to rub some people the wrong way, right? So everybody that knows me knows I don't care about that. But I was kind of over Nita. A lot of the guys in Prime Power, they were pretty full of themselves, and I didn't get along with a lot of them. I was kind of like the champion of the underdog, so to speak. We were all the misfits, but we could go do whatever needed to get done. And
Right.
I had a bad taste in my mouth for Nita, which is why when I got out, I interviewed with some Nita companies. There was no way, and I was going to go work for Shermco because everybody in Prime Power was Shermco, Shermco,
Yep.
Shermco at the time. Which Shermco did a good job advertising to those guys. I
Hmm.
don't blame them at all for it, but it just put such a bad taste in my mouth because it was just so much, just I don't know. And then the other motivating factor was I had this platoon sergeant that basically told me I was never going to succeed out of the military, which that's
We
what they.
all we all had that one, right? Like they
Hey,
exist in every
okay,
squadron, platoon,
yeah,
division, whatever it
I'm
may
waiting to
be.
find him. I can't even remember his name, but I'm waiting to find him when I somebody's going to tell me. My buddies watching
Absolutely.
this, they're going to tell me who that was.
I've got that hit list over here too, man. So it
Yep.
happens.
So, and that was what motivated me. When people say you
Yep.
can't do it, I'm going to go do it. I'm going to do it as best I can.
Absolutely. Tell me I can't, and I'm going to show you
Yeah,
different. I
that's right.
freaking love it. That is awesome. And so, obviously, kind of take us through your early on history. So, you obviously got on early with PS and the field service manager role, but tell us about some of the other ones. So, getting out of the military, how was that process for you, for one? Because this is one of those things that we talk through often, right? And caveat, I'm not hating on TAP class. I think it's a vital function, but you can only squeeze so much crap into a couple of weeks worth of stuff when you're trying to get somebody from having all of the institutional advantages and logistics taken care of, and you just point and shoot for the most part, right? So there's a lot of that. So not faulting them, but what was your experience like getting out?
For me, I went through the transition, and it was 90%. How do you get the maximum disability rating that you can get? Right.
It's
I got
that.
out of the military, what, 2015, 9 years ago. So I was, 32, 33 maybe. So I don't have disabilities. I didn't get injured. I don't have PTSD. I spent 12 years in the military and obviously probably could file some disability, but I was good, right? I had a bunch of buddies that actually lost their legs, lost their arm, whatever. They need that disability more than I did. So I have zero disability, never filed for it, probably never will. But TAP was rough for me. I didn't get much out of it. I didn't take a lot of the feedback they were given about the resumes because it was really geared towards those government jobs.
Yep.
Right. So I felt like it was pretty lacking in that area. But my transition out was kind of an interesting one. I don't know how familiar you are with this, but I was towards the end of my enlistment and they gave me orders to be stationed. I forget where it was, but I was like, I'm not re-enlisting for this. I don't have the time left to do it.
Right.
So do it. Right. You can't send me there. So I got flagged for not re-enlisting. Right. I signed a deck statement and that was the best thing I ever did. I had a great captain who said, hey, put in a 4187, get out early and go live your life. So
there you go.
Pushed it through. He signed it for me. The battalion commander at Prime Power signed it for me. And the great thing about being Prime Power is the next in line is a 3-star general, and he don't care what he's signing. He signed
it. He'll get her done.
So I got out a lot sooner than I thought because they flagged me and they weren't happy that I wasn't re-enlisting, which I get. I don't blame them for it.
Needs of the service, right? That's what's always going to be first and foremost, so we can't fault them.
100%. But I had already been ready, right? I've been reaching out, looking for jobs. So I applied to GE. I applied to a company up in Alaska, interviewed with both of them, really liked both of them. But at the time, I felt like GE was the best option for me. Well known. I mean, everybody knows who GE is at the time. It was California, which I wasn't too fond of, being from North Carolina myself.
Right.
So I went to California for a little while, and I'll tell you, it was the best career move I ever made, was going to work for GE. I learned so much, did a lot.
So is that what you attribute to it? What about it stuck out that was so impactful at GE?
You solve problems at GE. Right. And I notice it in the NETA world, right? You got a lot of technicians, you test it, you fail it, you go about your day.
Yes.
You don't know why it failed. You don't care why it failed, right? A lot of NETA technicians are that way. And then GE, I came in behind a lot of NETA technicians when they fail something, little things would fail. And it's like, well, no, it's actually good. You just kind of didn't test it the right way. Or manufacturer recommends you do it this way, but you did it this way. I get it, right? You're NETA, you don't do it that way. So I learned a different side of it, obviously having the NETA background, being Prime Power, and being on the manufacturer side. I did my very first job as a technician right out of the Army. My second day on the job, I went to the Golden Gate Bridge to troubleshoot a 480 volt soft start that kept tripping on ground fault.
I'll be there. How cool is that? That is awesome.
I was sweating bullets. But the guy, Besnik Miftari, he's a GE field engineer. He gave me one piece of advice that I give everybody. And his advice was the only difference between me and him was he had the opportunity to do the job and I didn't. That's it.
I like that.
He told me that and I was like, you know what? Give me that manual. Let me go do this. And ended up figuring it out. CT wire was backwards, swapped it.
I'll be damned.
And there you go. Started running like it was supposed to, no problems, right? So
that's I wonder how long it had been there if it's causing those trips for that long. You know what I mean? If it's
fun fact. Besnik went out there 3 times to go look at it, and they could have figured out what's wrong with it. So, is what it is. He gave me the manual. I had no experience with these at all. I showed up and didn't even know what it looked like. Luckily, I looked at the manual so I could kind of figure out what it was supposed to look like.
Right.
So I'm in the electrical room looking at the MCC, wondering what is this VFD? So which one is tripping? Trying to ask them so they could point out the soft start to me. But no, I learned it,
That is awesome. Shockingly, if you just get out there and put that gray matter to work and work through the process.
It's crazy.
And it's funny because that's one of those messages that just kind of resonates throughout all the interviews that we've done is like a lot of the test equipment obviously is very, very advanced stuff, and you can literally get away as a tester. And I think and logically for billable hours, it makes sense. Get somebody trained up to the minimum standards and specifications that can run a test set, go out, do the test report, submit it, and go on to the next one for billable hours. And I'm not saying that's normal. Obviously, I don't come from a background of NETA, but it just seems that one of the resonating messages is that it's always we're training more to button pushing than we are to theory and fundamentals and actual troubleshooting methodologies and things like that. Would you say that's pretty accurate in your experience as well?
I think you almost have to, right? It's not the ideal answer, but you kind of almost have to because, like we talk about, there's no trade school for what we do. There's no on the job training is real difficult because you got timelines, you got schedules, and it's somebody else's equipment that they own. So if you do it wrong, you got to replace
liabilities and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you're right. A lot of it is that, but at some point, the transition has to get away from just pushing the buttons to actually understanding what you're doing. And that's kind of the advice I try to give to all of our NETA guys that work here is look at testing. Testing is you give anybody a test set, they're going to be able to figure it out after a while. Being able to do the testing, that's 10% of what we do.
Right.
The other 90% of it is why. Why is this thing happening? Why is the TTR bad? Why is our winding resistance?
Yeah,
what's
absolutely.
the problem? When I see a bad winding resistance, where is the problem? Is the winding bad or
is it treeing? Could it be something else that caused it? Are you having an actual degradation? What is the actual root cause?
Right. Is your little jumper you're using on your tap connection causing your high resistance?
Absolutely.
Right? You know, and I find that some of your older technicians get that, right? Because they didn't have all of this digital,
all the fancy new tech.
Right? And then your new techs, they're NETA 3, NETA 4, but they struggle with the troubleshooting, why the test didn't work like it was supposed to.
So what do you, and this is kind of going into some theoreticals here. What do you think the answer to fix that is? Is there a fix? And I know we kind of talk about this on different occasions here, but is there a fix to make it better? Because obviously we're very reputationally driven, so if NETA gets a bad name, testing companies are going to get a bad name. So, there's obviously some ownership that has to happen within the companies just for the stability of the industry as well. And I know you and I talked offline about some workforce development and things like that, but do you think that's going to be the fix, or is there a fix to be had, or is it a culture issue, or what's kind of the underlying in your opinion?
It's kind of both, right? You said the key word that everybody talks about, right? It's the culture, right? What's your culture, right? So at some point, those of us that know better have to hold those of us that don't know better accountable. Comes down to that at the end of the day, right? What type of technician do you want to be at the end of the day? You and I have talked quite a bit. We've been kind of rebranding PES and kind of turning it into the company that it's going to be, right? And, I even sent you over our list of guiding principles. And one of those is, execute so well, our worst is better than their best. And on paper, everyone's like, oh, yeah, for sure. I do that, right? All the time. But then when you pry and you push and you say, hey, you were 5 minutes late to this meeting. I was on time. So how are you telling me that you're 5 minutes late is better than me being on time? And it's just developing that culture, right? Another one of ours is continually improve your competitive advantage, right? I have this conversation with people a lot, and I ask them, what's your competitive advantage, right? What makes you better than the person next to you, right? You're both NETA 3s. What makes you better than this?
Absolutely.
And people struggle with that answer, right? So it's our job as the experienced technicians or, high speed, whatever you want to call it, right? Those that are kind of fast tracking their career. It's our responsibility to have those difficult conversations with people and tell them like, hey, you can do better than what you're doing. You've been doing this for 15 years and this is all you can do. Like, what's holding you back? And you make people kind of answer that question. So it's training, it's culture, it's accountability at the end of the day, but really it kind of falls on us that know better. Are we doing something about it? That's really what it
and toeing the line with that more specifically and making sure you're holding to account those individuals, because if you don't, it's just like, and to me, this is one of those areas where I see a lot of what we did in the military that kind of crosses over specific from that leadership spectrum, like down to the stupid crap, like not putting your hands in your pants, or walking with your hands in your pockets.
But you're in the Air Force, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But and it seems so asinine to your regular soldier, airman, or whoever's out there. Like, Why is that a thing? It's literally reinforcement of standards constantly, and we may see it as nagging, but guess what? Just subliminally, that it kind of sticks. But I've also had conversations with folks that have come from that military background. Like one of my ex-commanding officers, he was an HR specialist and got out and did some things. And even he got in trouble at times because of trying to apply some of those concepts that we have from a leadership in the military over, like staying in your own lane is a big thing out, like don't step on people's toes. Whereas we come from that culture of fix it. If you see something, say something, fix something. And so did you see any of that, or does that kind of apply to the culture, or are you making anything to try to inject some of what you learn in the military into the PES construct of running thing?
I mean, definitely. I think anybody who spent a significant amount of time, I mean, I spent 12 years, right? I didn't retire, but I spent 12 years with a healthy amount of time. So I think anybody with that long of a background in a very structured, very disciplined, very much don't make excuses. It just has to get done. If it's broken, fix it, right?
Right.
You have to kind of interject that in. I mean, that's what makes anybody with military experience valuable. If you're not bringing that to the organization that you're in, then what are you bringing at the end of the day?
Absolutely.
So yeah, you kind of have to. I mean, and you run into it, right? Because people that don't have that background, they struggle. Okay, well, why does this matter, right? Why does it matter that my hands are in my pocket? It's not your hands being in your pocket. It's we don't want you to have your hands in your pocket because there's a different reason for that, right? So it's a lot of that. And like you said, the whole staying in your lane, or if there's a problem, you got to fix it type stuff. I mean, I feel like for us, you go back to those guiding principles, right? You go back to what at the core of the company, what are you trying to do at the end of the day? And I mean, I could talk on it all day. The one that comes to mind as far as helping each other fix problems, one that we all put a lot of faith and value in is treat others how you want those that matter the most to you to be treated, right? Like you've got kids, I've got kids. I don't want somebody treating my daughter shitty. I don't know if I can say that, but I don't want somebody treating my daughter bad, right?
We try not to drop the F word. That's about it.
Yeah. I got a bad mouth. I'm doing really good.
Same, man. Same. That's part of that military service thing.
That's right. But you don't want somebody treating your kids bad. Your kids are going to make mistakes. Your kids are going to need help. You don't want when your kids need help for their peers to laugh at them and talk about them behind their back. You want when your kids need help for their peers to step in and say, "Hey, what can I help you with?" And that's the culture that we try to establish here. There's no yelling. It's kind of surprising, military background. You feel like people yell all the time, right?
They don't, man.
We don't yell here. Nobody's getting yelled at. Nobody's getting cussed out. I mean, we talk a lot of trash to each other. I'm the driving force behind that. I get HR'd all the time by our HR. Telling me, hey, you can't say that, or hey, careful. But at the end of the day, it's respect. You treat everybody the same, regardless of who they are. You treat them how you'd be okay with somebody treating your loved ones, and at the end of the day, it all works. It's just an open, transparent conversation.
It's beautiful. And to your point, I think there's something to be said about having that little bit of trash talking. That's what elite level players do. You got to have that competitive spirit. And I think that's one of the things that we would probably benefit more from if that translated over, because whenever you're like having a beer with somebody at the bar, you can talk to any veteran that you pick out of a lineup and you can have hours long conversation. I think it's just built around that culture of camaraderie and, and everything like that. And we've kind of done away with a lot of that stuff for the sense of some of the HR sensibilities. And to me, it's more beneficial. I served on an all-male ship and definitely was the most tight-knit. And that's not a shot against females by any stretch of the imagination. But it's just to have that level of camaraderie with the likenesses and things like that from, all walks and backgrounds of life. And it was truly some of the best years of my life. And it's just great, man. So I wish we could see more of it, I guess, is kind of the whole point of that sidebar there.
We do it. We interviewed a guy that was in the Marines. He was coming in to interview for a project manager role. And I went and grabbed a box of crayons and everybody looked at me like I was stupid, right? And so the interview's going on and we're talking, and about halfway through the interview, I pulled the crayons out and kind of set them on the table. And the guy, he just started smiling. He knew what was coming. And everybody that
I love that
wasn't in the military, they were like, "What are you doing?
What is this?"
I was like, "Are you getting hungry over there?" Yourself? And he just laughed. But that's what I do. I trash talk to a fault. Being a CEO, I'm supposed to be professional and be very aware of that stuff. And that's probably my biggest weakness is I'm not very professional when it
We
comes to
share that same weakness.
but it's
So
out of respect, it's out of respect. And
I think it's just it's more real, right? You're taking
yeah,
some of the polish off. I want to get to know you. I want to know what kind of makes you tick. What's off limits, and you can kind of dig and scope for that
yeah,
stuff very quickly if given the opportunity to do so. And I think it's a
absolutely.
amplifier and expediter of that timeline in some
For
instances.
sure.
So we're spitting the same language on that front, Robert, for sure.
That's right.
And so you bounce. So kind of back to the question sets here, so I don't eat away your whole damn day. But so you bounced kind of. So you started at GE, and then where did you go after GE?
So at GE, I went to Schneider.
Yep.
It was a hard decision for me to leave GE, but I was in a hotel about 279 nights out of the year. So it was time for me to make a change. So
Fair
I
enough.
was in Houston. I transferred to Schneider Electric. They got a big Houston office, very industrial there. So I was at Schneider for a couple years, doing the same thing I did at GE. If I had to pick between the two, I like the people that I work with at both about the same. But GE is where I learned the most. I did a lot of cool stuff there. Went to a lot of cool places, but I was never home, right? So there's the trade off.
There's the balance, right?
Yeah. And then working at Schneider, got introduced to PES through those famous recruiters that are always trying to fill a spot.
Not
And
us.
yeah, come on, never. So got introduced to PES. That was my foray into the needle world. I was interested in the opportunity because I saw the potential, right? It's a family owned company, been around for 20 plus years in the San Antonio area before I came to it. And they were looking to grow and just kind of get out of just being a small town NITA company. They were the first NITA company in San Antonio.
I'll be dang. Okay, I didn't know
So
that. That's cool.
very familiar with it. It came down to me and another guy who was already a NITA 3. I wasn't NITA, so they were a little concerned about that,
Right.
whether I was going to be able to pass my NITA 3 or not. And I was like, well, I mean, I've been doing this. I know what I'm doing. I'm pretty sure I can pass it. Can't be that hard, right? So they took a chance and brought me on board.
That is awesome. And then, so you've been there for how long now?
I will be here 5 years in December.
That is wild. So,
5 years.
for the audience, 5 years, one company from field service manager to CEO.
That's right.
And so you decided to plant your flag at PES and kind of ride it out there. You saw the potential and opportunity. What were some of the things that kind of drove that internal timeline and gave you that and the opportunities that kind of presented themselves in that journey from that aspect of things?
Well, honestly, I don't want to downplay anything, but it's pretty easy when you come. I was employee number 15.
Okay.
I was the 15th employee at the time,
Gotcha.
right? So it wasn't very big. And they wanted to grow. So that's what we did. I came in, we, started our growth by just delivering better quality products, right? Doing a better job, understanding what the customer really wanted instead of what they were asking for. And then as the company grows, because I was there, I just kind of grew with it. We've had a lot of good employees over the years. We've lost a lot of good employees. We've had some not so great employees, and we've lost some not so great employees. That's business, right? It has its ups and downs. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. I think there was no way I could sit here and tell anybody that I was ready for what was coming. I definitely was winging it. I definitely made some mistakes. And we're still recovering from some of those mistakes. And it is what it is. It's business. It's life.
It is.
But you come out of it better than you went into it every single time, always.
No, absolutely. And so within that 5 years, and so field service manager is kind of where you started, and then you went to ops manager, and then from ops to CEO, correct?
Pretty much, yeah.
So you've basically worn all of the hats in the management spectrum there. And what was kind of the deciding factor? So I know you mentioned being private. Obviously, it's a quanta company now. How did that all go? And what were some of the trials and tribulations associated with going through the buyout? And then obviously you being named a CEO under that PE-backed umbrella of companies. And how did that process play out?
Well, so the being acquired, it was a tough one, right? PES has been approached by a lot, all the big name private equity companies out there. We all know who they are, right? But the previous owners, they didn't want to go that route. They didn't want to go to private equity and turn around and be sold again, and then turn around and be sold again, and then be sold again. So when it was time, the owner, he's 60s, almost 70, so he was ready to just go on to bigger, better things. And Quanta was an option. And Quanta being a publicly traded company,
Mm-hmm.
stock options are there. Like, I always, me and Daniel, he's the owner's son, we always laughed. And you got all these guys in these private equity companies with ownership of the company, but they can't tell you what it's worth. There's nothing. You don't know what
Right.
it's worth, right, until it's sold. Then maybe it's worth what you thought it was, but it probably isn't at the end of the day. Whereas now, we've got a piece of paper that has a company stock with a value that is on the stock market, that
Makes
is
sense.
very
Yeah.
public for everybody to see. So I think that was a big driving force behind, do we go private equity or do
Where
we
do you
go
go?
to a publicly traded company? And as far as I know, we're the only NITA company part of a publicly traded company. I don't think there's anybody else.
No,
The
because
only
I
one that
mean,
is,
I'm trying to go through the list. Most of them are via PE
yeah,
acquisitions.
yeah. And a Splund, but I don't think a Splund, they might be publicly traded.
Yeah, they're public. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
I think that would be the exception. And there's a couple of
yeah.
small players that are doing some
But not
consolidation,
much.
but by and large, yeah,
Yeah,
you're correct.
not much. So it's
Yeah.
exciting. I mean, it was a whirlwind of a ride. The circumstances for me to take over as CEO was just, we gotta, get PES ready for the next thing. What's coming next?
Well,
We
what's
were,
that next thing looking like for you guys?
oh man, drinking water through 3 fire hydrants in a row. It never slows down.
No, I
Obviously,
agree.
everybody knows who Quanta is. They're a massive, power company. They build substations. They build transmission lines. Electrical con. They just bought Cupertino Electric.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody
Saw that.
knows. They know some company that's
Dash
associated with
Hills, or yeah.
Blattner, right? They own Blattner. They own Dash Shield. They own all these big guys. So it's just kind of coordinating the resources inside of Quanta. Us being NITA, a lot of people think, oh, you're getting all this work from Quanta, but us being NITA, you can't,
Mm-mm.
right?
Nope.
We can't commission and take POs from Quanta companies. So it's building those relationships with the end users to say, hey,
Yep.
we're a NITA company inside Quanta. Let us work for you. So it's been a little slower than you would think.
I could see that.
Being
Yeah.
being acquired by a large company, making sure we're doing things the right way. But really, what it is now we got a company that's invested in some training, building our in-house training program. It sucks for recruiters, but we're trying not to have to use recruiters
No,
very
I
much.
mean, fair enough.
Building in-house. I go
The
to you
ones that the ones that need it, will rise to the top at the end of the day as part of the
for sure.
market, for what it is on that end, and totally understand from that. And so it kind of answered some of the questions I kind of had. So, what are some of the benefits of being acquired by, being privately held? Did you see more capital being injected for to the point of training or ops, and then kind of like, are there more red tape hurdles to overcome now due to the extra layers of bureaucracy, or how does that?
Obviously, it's a little bit of both, right?
Yeah.
There's definitely some more red tape. What I've learned the most is it's a public company, right? So your forecast matters.
Yeah.
Your projections matter, right?
Big time.
If you're gonna guess, you better guess pretty close, right? Am I very good at it? No comment, right? But
Trending performers are always fun, man.
that's right. I'm getting better at it, right? So it's both. There's some red tape for a reason.
Yep.
We can't. You can't say you're going to do one thing and then quarter ends and you didn't, right? Because stock values depend on it now.
There's a lot more stakeholders involved in outcomes, isn't there?
Absolutely, right? Nobody cares if you had a bad quarter. You better get the number you said you were going to get.
Exactly.
And you can't sandbag it too much because then you withheld some stock value because we could have been worth more money.
That's the first time I've heard sandbag introduced on a conversation, and I know it.
You're
Like
welcome.
it's so applicable, man. Month to month, and quarter to quarter goals. Carry it over to the next one.
That's right. So I've learned a lot. It's been fun. It's been a wild ride for sure. It's nice having a very large company that supports that, when something goes wrong and you got that big company that can help take care of it, right? It's nice having a legal team, making sure we're not signing contracts we shouldn't be signing. But then you got the other side of that where you got a big accounting system. Sometimes it takes a long time for that to move,
Yeah, absolutely.
that you hold on to dollars. Vendors are like, hey, when we get paid, oh, sorry, it's the quarter close. I mean, you know this, right?
I do know this.
Right. So it's tough,
Yeah, part of it though. Yeah,
high level.
absolutely.
It's like, hey, look, charge us a little more because this is going to happen.
Yep.
Let's make sure you're good with what you're agreeing to because you know how it
There's
is.
going to be headaches just due to it. And coming from that background, like, and that's a lot of people don't understand. It's once you get into these larger, like inherently, you're going to have more bureaucratic processes because there has to be the checks and balances. And I could see where it could be burdensome for some, but if you understand it, it's like, okay, it's got to happen this way.
Yep.
So,
I mean, like I said, drinking water through 3 fire hydrants. It's it's rough, man.
I
But it's
get
fun.
it.
I've learned so much in the past 6 months.
I can only imagine,
It's
man.
insane how much I know now compared to what I did.
8K filings, all the SEC
All of it.
filings, and looking at the pro formas and your P&L statements.
Yeah. Are you in this county? Oh, you got to tax that. Oh, you're gonna be in this county. Oh.
Yeah,
So
don't get me started on the IRS, man.
exactly.
Get flagged for something over here.
Yeah, but it's been a good time. I mean, it's you got a wealth of resources
Absolutely.
that are willing to help. They get in where they need to. Sales is something I was never big into. Right, you get me in front of somebody that we're already doing work with, I can upsell them all day long. Right, but getting new business, new customers is tough.
It feels slimy, right? Like you're the slimy salesman, and I don't want to be that guy.
But you got to remember too, at the end of the day, you have a service they need.
Yeah,
they're getting it from somebody. You just got to make them. You got to get them to use you.
Mm-hmm.
Better than the next guy. Why should we use you guys? And I've learned that. We used to be any customer is a good customer. To now we got to say, well, maybe they're not all great. Right?
It's a great place to be. No, selective, being able to hire and fire your clientele is a very, very cool place to be. And I love it. I'm with you on that front. So
for sure.
Now within that family, so you're obviously now part of Quanta. How has that impacted? Like, do they still let you kind of run the ship as you see fit at PES?
So the good thing about Quanta that I've seen, and they all say it, right? You don't really believe it till you see it, but it really is just a bunch of small companies. They all operate independently.
Very cool.
If we're using some other Quanta company to help us with something, you're giving them a PO, you're treating them like they're their own company. I mean, obviously we come together for our quarterly meetings and we do, we interact that way, but it's just a bunch of self-run. You do what you got to do. What do you need from us? Type of
Very
company.
cool.
You don't believe it till you see it. And obviously, like you said, it's a publicly traded company, so there are some things that they have to be involved in, right? You're not going to be completely autonomous because financials matter,
huge.
All this stuff matters, right? It's all public info. You got to save your files a little bit differently now, right? You can't put them all on, a public cloud or whatever. It's different,
right?
But we're still PES. All our leadership is still here. No, they didn't put anybody in place that wasn't part of PES in the past.
Very cool. You see that oftentimes in these kind of things as well. So they have somebody that's kind of a quote unquote inside player, right? That understands the corporate policy.
We just have access. I mean, their accounting team helps us. The corporate safety team is there to provide resources if we need it.
That's awesome.
Obviously, fleet, right? One of the largest fleets in the country, so you get a lot of discount on stuff like that. So you got the resources without a lot of the micromanaging.
That's very cool and fairly unique, to be honest. You don't hear it as much, but again, like you said, it's unique being a small or a collective group of smaller companies. I think is probably the way they're able to accomplish it there. So definitely like that.
Yeah, it's been interesting. We were hesitant. We weren't sure. Everybody says it, so. We were like, yeah.
Fear of the unknown every time, man.
But so far it has been. And I think there's some room for improvement, right? There's a lot of things that went well. There's some things that didn't go so well. At the end of the day, we still got to perform, right? Yep. And if you're not performing, then they're going to micromanage, as they should.
Absolutely.
Right? And if you are performing, then it's kind of backed off a little bit. It just kind of is what it is.
Very, very cool. So it does sound like you are going to be able to kind of implement, and I know we've exchanged a lot of these ideas on core values and principles and thought leadership and stuff. So it sounds like they've given you a lot of rope to kind of go out and execute that as you would like to, as you see fit. So what are some of those things that are kind of driving culture over there, or you're trying to implement to make PES a standout? We kind of talked through a couple of them earlier, but what makes PES the go-to service in your opinion from that? So and how are you building that?
Absolutely. So it's really just making sure, number one, you got to know what the customer is actually asking for at the end of the day. A lot of our customers, they ask you for a quote, and if you've got any sense, you're looking at it and you're like, I don't really think this is what what you really want, right? So it's getting ahead of that, spending a lot more time on the front end, understanding what does the customer need, what problem are they trying to solve, because they're not asking you for a quote because they want to spend money. They're asking you for a quote because they got a problem that they need
Right.
solved, right? Whether it's acceptance testing, commissioning, troubleshooting, maintenance, whatever it may be, it's that. The other thing too is we just pride ourselves on, in our email signature, our company promise line that we do is we champion safety, right? So the conversation immediately goes, can we do this safely? Is there a better way to do this? What you're asking us to do, even viable, right? So we have that conversation with them. And a lot of our customers are starting to reach out to us for support on how they can do something safer than what they were doing in the past, right? And then consistent communication. Always talk to the customer. Keep them informed. This is what we're doing. This is the problems we're having. We're NETA company. Every NETA company has gone through it. Everybody has a bad job. Everybody has a great job. Everybody has issues. It's just the nature of the beast, right? But what we try to pride ourselves on is the standard of communication. All of our customers, we reach out, we talk, meetings, back and forth, and then indisputable results is what we're trying to offer at the end of the day. And that's the hardest thing. That's the hardest thing to deliver for any company, because you got so many other people responsible for delivering those results. There's just so much room for error, right? So that's our promised land. So now how do we get there? And that's our guiding principles, right? Execute so well,
Yep.
your work is better than their best. If you're living up to that, then your bad day, the customer's never even going to know it's a bad day.
Right.
You're going to get on there and have a bad day, and everything's still going to work out the way it needs to work. So we strive for that, right? We, again, do the right thing, even, regardless of scrutiny. And that goes above just being a good person. It's don't pencil whip your data. If you got bad results,
Integrity.
go
Yeah.
right. It's integrity at the end of the day, our competitive advantage. What is your competitive advantage? Are you improving it? A lot of people struggle with knowing why they're better than their peers and what
Absolutely.
sets them apart. But then it's like, okay, that's what sets you apart. But are you getting better at that? Or are your peers catching up to you at the end of the day? So it's really just kind of pushing everybody to see, like, hey, 5 years out of the military, I was a manager, right? And then 4 years later, I'm the CEO of the
It's pretty
company.
wild. Yeah.
And my college degree is liberal studies because I got tired of being in college, right? I don't have an MBA. I don't have an engineering degree. I don't have any of that stuff. But what I did do is I knew what I wanted. I invested in myself. I studied. I learned what we were doing. I get out there and I just do it. I took my NETA 2. Uh, I haven't failed a NETA exam yet. There's not one NETA exam I haven't been able to pass on the first try. But it's because
You put
I
in the
made
effort.
sure I knew what I was doing. I didn't go through the motions, and I try to hold everybody to that standard. And what I tell people, I was given a task by my boss is, why do people want to follow me? Right. So if you're interested in coming to work here,
Mm-hmm.
you got your options between two people. What do I offer you that somebody else doesn't? And
Right.
what I tell everybody, and my answer to this is very clear, and I hope the people that know me believe this. I feel like they do. Maybe they don't. So if they see this, send me a message and tell me, am I full of
Absolutely.
shit or is it true? But what I offer people is to push them to do more than they ever thought they were capable of doing. At the end of the day, that's what I offer, because that's what I push myself to do. And that's what I want for everybody else. And if you're on board with that, it takes accountability. It takes
Yeah,
honest
absolutely.
conversations. It takes real feedback, right? If you just want somebody to tell you you're great, that's not going to be me, right?
Right.
Not going to be me. But if you want somebody to tell you what you can grow in and what you can do better, that's what we offer here, right? What do
I
you
think
really
that's great.
at the
You're
end?
building and championing a culture of excellence, and it's not like, to your point, it's not going to be for everyone, right?
Right.
Like that's kind of the thing, and I think that's also a very important thing in kind of that onboarding process is the ability to self-select out. These are the standards that we're looking to implement here. You're either on board with it or not. Go find another opportunity that'll better suit what you're looking to get out of life, and so. And again, that's where I can kind of see those parallels and similarities to what we did in the military, and kind of those that it works for, and then you live and breathe it, obviously, because of your track record there. So you're not only preaching and holding the standard, but you're also living it, as is evidenced by your career progression. So kudos to you, man. I think that's phenomenal stuff, and I think that's personally the way to go about it and build it. And we're trying to do something very similar over here. I'm looking to grow the team by another 3, 4, 5 recruiters just based on the book of business we have. But that just because the need is there doesn't mean we're not going to be as highly selective as possible in doing so and holding ourselves to that standard and making sure. And so it's a slower process. You would think a recruiter could go find other recruiters very easily, and we can, but it's which ones fit to that point. Yep. So I think
we were in that boat, right? We tried to grow, and we made some hires that didn't pan out.
Yep.
They didn't. It wasn't what we were looking for, and you kind of gotta be very critical of who you bring on, right? And it sucks. People get upset. They don't like it. It is what it is, But at the end of the day, like you said, it's yours. This is yours. It's your name, like your company. You're hiring recruiters. You know what you did to get where you are, and you want the people that are going to represent you to do the same thing.
Right.
Be that team player.
And I want them to be better. I mean, and that's one of those fallacies that comes along with the business. Like, nobody's going to care about your business as much as you. And I understand that part of it, but I'm trying to hire people that are infinitely smarter than I am and have skill sets that are, well beyond what I bring, because that's how you build that collective, awesome team that's just going to outperform everyone out there. So, I think it's the right way to go about it. We may be off base here, but the knowledge that's out there seems to dictate that we're looking at it through the right lens and going.
Absolutely, I think so. You said something right. Nobody's going to care about your business the way you do. Here's the counter to that, right? You want them to care about themselves as much as you care about yourself.
There you go.
Right?
Huge.
It ain't even about the business at the end of the day.
No, it is. And collectively just bettering each other and building out that elite team. And
the business won't.
The business is just the medium with which you're delivering it, or your vessel. So I love that, man. I think that's definitely solid. And then, so we kind of touched on the NETA aspect, and obviously PES is a NETA company. What does it look like to be a NETA? Let's say you bring on a NETA 1 fresh out of some sort of 2-year program. What does their onboarding look like for you? Where do you typically have them? What are you doing to expand their knowledge and getting them spun up to be as successful as possible?
It's definitely different by the person, right? Where are they coming out of? Are they coming out of TSTC? Are they coming out with an engineering degree? Are they coming out fresh out of high school, right? We'll take anybody at kind of any level, right? But obviously first couple weeks, come on board, get familiar with our policies, go through our trainings, NFPA 70E, everybody gets OSHA 10.
Okay, so you get OSHA 10 and NFPA training right out of the gate.
That's Lotto, confined space, all your basic trainings that need to be done. We go through all of that first. That's the first thing that you do. Yeah. On the job training after that that's our current process, right? So now you're paired up with a senior technician. You're going to follow that technician around, whatever jobs they have, you're going to go on with that technician. And then once you kind of get in and you realize, okay, this is what you want to do. Now we try to pair you up with that NETA 3, NETA 4. You're going to follow that guy around, and then you're going to go work with another NETA 3 or NETA 4 and kind of get their perspective on how to do things. It's really, we all struggle with the same thing. It's one, you need them to be billable quickly, but you need them to be safe. You need them to be able to get on the job site and actually do something on the job site. So it's really just very heavy OJT. We send out weekly quizzes and tests that are very mirrored to the NETA exam. And those tests, we're really looking to see who's going to take the initiative and do it. It's not required, right? We send it out. We send the test.
You can self-select in or out, right?
Absolutely. Right? You want to do it, great. If you don't want to do it, fine, right? It is what it is. But what we're doing is looking to see who's willing to invest in themselves. Mm-hmm. You're a recruiter in this business. We've all been in this business. Anybody that's watching this, 2-3 months from now, they're going to know exactly what I'm saying is it's hard to find people who are willing to invest in themselves these days.
It really is. And it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. But I think it's just, this is definitely a sidebar or segue going on, but a lot of it has to do with societal issues that we're dealing with right now. And it's one of those, I don't discount full generations of millennials or Gen X or whatever, but it's not as common. And it seems even more so these days to find those individuals that are willing to invest in themselves. And again, that's part of like what we do, right? As recruiters, that's why you guys pay us absorbent amounts of money, is because we're looking for those people that do want to fix themselves. And that's kind of what it, to that tune. So.
And that's what we try to do. And obviously going forward, right, the future, what that's going to look like is we're going to have our in-house training program. You're going to get in there and you're going to get your hands on switchgear, and you're going to get your hands on transformers, and you're going to get in a substation. Part of being part of Quanta is we got a pretty legitimate training facility right outside of Austin called the Lazy Q.
Yep, Lazy Q Ranch.
Yep. 2,000 acres of training, right?
That's wild, man. That's awesome.
So that's what we have. And utilizing that the best way is figuring out those plans. I'm going to go meet next week, and we're working on developing a substation testing and commissioning, BESS testing and commissioning, like a curriculum that is really catered to this is what we need to do to be successful in this industry. Testing switchgear and stuff like that, that's always going to be a thing. But it's substations, solar farms, wind farms, BESS. That's the future. End users are putting in their own power plants these days, right? So
we're hearing even nuclear these days, with Microsoft. It's crazy.
And all that stuff has to be tested and commissioned correctly, right? So there's a big gap. There's a lot of older guys that know how to do it, and there's not a lot of the younger guys that know how to do it or want to do it. That's the other problem that you have. So
it's the great wave. It's coming, and it's something, and that's to the points of what we've talked about in offline conversations with other companies that are investing in similar type things. We're experiencing a shortfall of people that'll stick around, because you'll see a lot of that'll just kind of punch out. Hey, I gave this neat thing a try. Okay, I'd wash out, but we have to have more of this willing individuals that are going to take the place, because the retirements are outweighing the new members coming into the bottom line. And we're seeing it. I know we've talked about it, and in my discussion with every other recruiter, we're seeing it. And so I think it's brilliant that everybody is starting to kind of have this curriculum based mind. And I understand the why. You couldn't before. It's a cost center, right? So it's not billable hours. You have to invest in the training and things. But I think we finally hit this pendulum point, if you will, or pivot point, to where the hourly costs are getting insane for technicians. And we don't control that as recruiters, right? It's the demand of the market. And so there's just this massive shortfall of talent, to where I'm seeing, I talked to a couple fours in Denver. One was making 127 an hour. The other one was at 103. Like, that is not tenable for a larger organization, just in cash flow constraints and overhead. So without the billable, the RFPs are going to have to get absorbed in, and, the end users would have to absorb there. So the only answer is, to me, that logically makes sense, is bringing in new diverse talent and getting them trained up to standards and then putting them to work, which will hopefully offset the macro issue.
Yep, that's all you can do, and then it lets you open your candidate pools a lot bigger at that point.
Absolutely. Yep. And we're doing some creative stuff. Like I said, I'm big on veterans. Obviously, you get it. And we're working some other reduced fee things to try to get transitioning nuclear electricians mates in, to where we're still benefiting, something that covers our admin costs, but we're pipelining folks. And I think that's what it's going to take. It's not that we're doing anything to make an impact, but that's just, to me, and I mean, it may be a sky is falling take, right? But I'm just, as a kind of an outsider that looks at all the talent constraints in the industry, it's getting to a crucial point, because there's so much demand for the work and the skills of our industry out there. We just don't have enough to man them, and we're missing out on contract opportunities and things like that. And I see it even on the data center side. I'm tied into a couple of folks over there that we talk to quite often. Same constraints are there. It's this really technical, I call it skilled blue collar labor is what it comes down to, skilled workforce. Sure. And it's rough. It is. Without being too doom and gloom, I guess.
That's definitely interesting. I tell you, it makes me almost want to go back and be a tech these days.
It is wild. And I mean, if I'm seeing twos, with double time OT and everything else, and per diem 150, 170 a year, it's just nuts. It's not a bad place to be, and you can make a damn good living at it.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
I love it. Well, and that kind of digs in. And so you made mention, so what are you guys typically hiring for there at PES? So obviously a need technician is something, but it sounds like if I live in the San Antonio area, I'm a high school graduate, I can apply through the PES website. What are you looking for out of those junior ones, those junior folks? And kind of, what does your candidate profile look like that you guys like to hire for those folks?
You try to look for motivation, right? You're trying to find somebody motivated. When you're hiring an entry level role, there's not a single technical question. I've interviewed people for entry-level roles, and I don't ask them a single technical question. We had this engineer fresh out of college come in to interview, and not a single technical question I was asked. It's, what do you like to do? How do you like your steak? Do you drink sweet tea or unsweet tea? Right, trying to get to know them, right?
Right.
You see how they react. Do they laugh at jokes? Do they joke back? You're hiring personality and drive. And what I've seen is these guys coming fresh out of school, they're thinking they're going to be thrown through this real intense technical interview.
Right.
And when it was over, like the guy we hired, he's turning out to be a great engineer. He's like, you didn't ask me any technical questions. It's like, what do you want me to do? Ask you a bunch of stuff you don't know so you can tell me you don't know the answer? I mean, you're just out of school, right?
We know we're going to have to invest in you to get you where you need to be at this point. Now I just need to know if you're a freaking fit for what we do here.
Exactly. So entry level, no experience, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for guys that just care, right? At the end of the day, they just care. Now, when you're looking at your experienced guys, it's a whole different conversation at that point, right? And you know this. You're a recruiter. You've talked to these guys 100 times. Everybody you talk to who has been in this business for 2 years can talk to you like they know how to do everything.
Oh, absolutely.
All the time.
I can speak the language, and I'm a recruiter that's never tested a single relay. You know?
Exactly, right? So now the trick is, how do you decipher that? How do you really drill in to see, do they really know what they're talking about? Do they know as much as they do? Very few, there's been a few people, but very few people undersell themselves, right? Mm-hmm. Most people say, oh, I can do everything. I can do this. I can do that. I can test relays. We got 1 million relay testers out there.
You sound like every candidate I talk to right now.
What do you think? We got 1 million relay testers. Until you put them in front of a relay and they're like, oh, I need RTS for this. Oh, I need this. It's like, okay, man, why are you telling me you can do this?
So what you meant to say is you've never touched a multi-LAN and you can troubleshoot these using NSERV, and that's about it.
And that's what I try to dig in, right? What's your biggest problem you had? What's the most embarrassing thing you did on a job, right? And as soon as somebody tells me, I've had one guy tell me he never makes mistakes. And I was like, well, man, I'm done with this interview.
Yeah,
we've all made mistakes. I can't go to the Enterprise site in Mount Bellevue, their largest site. I'm not allowed on site because I made a pretty bad mistake, right? We've all done it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If it says they haven't, you're not going to.
I could probably write a book on them, to be honest with you.
Exactly. So we look at that, right? Tell me the time where you had a struggle. What did you learn from it, right? Why did you make that mistake? What was your response to that mistake? And you really start to get to know these guys about, okay, what do they really know, right? Fortunately for myself, I'm pretty technical. I know a lot of stuff. I've done a lot of different things, medium voltage VFDs, sync motor exciters, relay, switchgear, you name it. PLCs. I'm comfortable with all of it. So I'm pretty good at really going to that next level of questions. So I interview pretty much every technician we have.
Beautiful.
I'm part of it. I'm looking to see, now we've got our guiding principles pretty lined out. So I tie back to that. How is your worst job? Is your worst job better than my best job, right? And flat out ask them, do you think your worst relay job was better than my best relay job?
Right.
And if you tell me yes, then we're going to, obviously you're not the guy that's self-aware, right? We all have bad jobs.
Well, and I think that this is where we're kind of touching on some of these interview kind of questions and mindsets. So I'm asking, and it may seem like it's kind of very obtuse and off-angled, but I'm looking for a certain response. I'm trying to elicit a response. And so, to your point, if you tell me you've never made a mistake, you're full of crap. You know what I mean? And so, all right, so now that's like, all right, red flag number one that goes off. And it's very casual conversation, specifically even for the more technical interviews. You can be in need of force. So my general entering argument is, okay, I know you can at least test at the standards level, right? So I'm going to generally give you a check in the block for your skill set at the moment. But I'm breaking down, like, how honest are you going to be? And we're looking for these very, very core tells, the blink rates and your postures change and your shifts and everything, because that's what we do. We're in the business of people. We see it every day. You do it as a hiring manager and an interviewer, and it just kind of becomes ingrained. It's not something that you really teach to your point about experience. It's just you live this thing enough. And that's why we ask these questions. So this is just a general caveat for anybody out there that's replaying. So, recruiter note in the conversation. Be honest and just be transparent and have a conversation. Like, we see it so often that we're going to kind of be able to knock off the BS just based on the flags. So food for thought on that side.
And I'll add to that, right? So I'll say now, those of us that are in my position, we've got the responsibility to stop that culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we've got some people that are working for us that have made mistakes here. And we go through the process. What happened? Why did it happen? How are we going to prevent it from happening in the future? Where did we drop the ball? Were you distracted? Were you confused about what your scope was? And then we come up with a solution for it. And 90% of these guys, 99% of the time say, man, my other company would, this
Let you
conversation would
go.
have been
Yeah.
way different,
Yeah.
right? So we, in our role as leaders, we got to make sure we encourage that environment of, look, mistakes are going to happen.
Absolutely.
None of us are going to grow unless we're making mistakes. So if we can't create that culture internally, then everybody that leaves your company, they're going to go tell, oh, I don't make mistakes. No, I've never made mistakes.
Absolutely. Well, and to your point, and this is something I think that all of us take away, and I've had conversation after conversation, lessons learned in an after action report after every critical cycle, get the feedback, and then you're now normalizing that culture of addressing mistakes and working through them and then spreading it around for everybody. And that's just one of those things that I know that we had pretty locked on. At least the Navy was very, anytime we did any sort of technical warfighting evolution, everything was debriefed. Your debrief was damn near as long as the evolution itself, So,
Yep.
and I think that's important because that's one of those things that you can do to foster that culture of transparency and let them know, like, look, we get it, things are going to happen, but we need to try to not let them happen again.
Yep.
and spread the awareness and knowledge and lessons learned.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's our job to help them grow. I hired a guy he was probably the best breaker technician there was, and he started, and I said, I don't want you ever testing another breaker again. You already know how to do that. Don't touch it.
Okay. Fair.
I don't need you doing that anymore.
Fair enough.
You've learned that, and he loves his job here. He'll never leave. He's done more in 6 months than he did in 4 years at his previous company.
Because you made him challenge his preconceived instead of just doing what he was comfortable with in his wheelhouse. I like
that's what you want to do. And
yeah,
we as media companies, we got to do that, right? Because we're putting ourselves in this bind where you can't find anybody to do anything more than one thing. So the longer we allow people to pigeonhole themselves, the longer we're going to be in this problem where you can't find good help. It's just hard.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more on that one, man. And like you said, it's just a lot of it has to do with the culture, right? And what we're actually allowing to happen. And I think a lot of that fixes itself. And so kind of getting back to your Army time a little bit here.
Yep.
We're right at an hour. I told you I could keep you on all day if you let me.
You got it. I had my whole afternoon open because I know how much you talk.
But so we kind of talked through the transition. If you could go back, would you kind of change your preparation to get out, knowing what you kind of know now as far as gearing up? And this is more towards that guy that's got a year left in service, getting ready to get out. Any words of advice you would give that individual?
Honestly, I would tell people, it's never too early to look to see what's out there, right? So I applied for a job probably 18 months out, right? Talk to them, and you'd be surprised if you've got a marketable skill, they will hold a job for you. They will. Also, the advice I would say is really push for those transition programs, right? There's that skills bridge.
Yes.
That you got to push for it, though. If you sit back and wait for somebody to give it to you, you're never going to get it. Fortunately for me, I signed a deck statement, got flagged, got out, right? So it worked for me. But we all see those guys that they don't push hard enough to do the transition, and they're in the field every single day. They don't have time to prep for themselves. So if you're getting to that point where you're ready to get out and you're not going to stay in. I remember for me, I was in Hawaii. I was standing in formation at 6 o'clock in the morning, getting rained on.
Barracks.
Getting rained on. And I'm like, I'm too smart to be standing in the rain. Like, what am I doing? And that was the day for me. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. Right?
No, fair enough.
I'm done with this. Right. So when I made my mind up, I thought I was going to retire from the Army. I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody I met, I really enjoyed meeting, made a lot of good friends, grew up, learned a lot about myself. The me getting out of the Army is 180 degrees opposite of the me going into the Army. And I'm sure we're all the same way. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But my advice is, when you want to get out, nobody's going to give it to you. The civilian life doesn't owe you anything.
Yep.
You got to go get it. What separates me from my peers is I went out and got it. I researched, I taught myself, I took classes, I paid for my own trainings, obviously the GI Bill will pay for school, but I signed up for, $200-300 courses just to learn something here
Yes.
and there, right?
It's an investment in yourself. And that's one of those things I preach it.
100%. And if you look at any other need of 3 and need of 4 out there, they're investing in themselves somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
They're not getting their knowledge from their job only. It's just not
No.
happening. And if you're not that person that's willing to invest in yourself, stay in the Army. You'll have a comfortable career.
Absolutely.
But if you're willing to invest in yourself and you want to do more and be more, get out, go do it. There's a lot of, you don't have to be good. You just got to work harder than the person next to you.
Absolutely.
It's not that hard. It's not
No,
that hard.
I'm with you. It's going to take me longer to get there because I'm kind of a slow bubba, you know what I mean? But I will get there, and I will eventually beat you. It's going to happen.
And that's all you got to do. So that's my advice: is push it. Nobody's going to give you anything. They're just not. And if that's your expectation, then don't get out.
I think that's very, very solid. Definitely solid advice. And so power in general, right? You've been in the industry for a long time. You're now the CEO. Your purview and your horizon of what's going on macroeconomically is probably a little bit more clear. Do you see power going anywhere in the next 10 to 20 years?
Power will always be there. It'll never be replaced. Commissioning, testing, it will always be a thing. As smart as the world is getting, you need power to drive all of it. It always will.
Absolutely.
Like you said, the source of the power may change, but at the end of the day, stuff still has to operate.
Absolutely.
Stuff has to work.
Still got to be transmitted and distributed.
Got to keep people safe, right? Everything, everything's got to do. It's not going anywhere. It's going to continue to grow. The population is growing. The demand for immediate access to things is continually growing. It all takes power. It's not going anywhere.
I agree. And I'm hearing the latest is 2.5 times what we currently have capacity factor for is going to be required at the end of the
more
decade.
Than that.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. It's insanity. It is absolutely crazy.
As much power as we're able to figure out how to create, it's going to get used.
It will get used. I agree with you on that one. Yep. 100%. Well, we're getting pretty close to the end of the question set here, and one I always like to ask. So we've kind of talked and bounced around in your lifetime and stuff, but knowing what you knew now, kind of similar to the last question, but going back and talking to that 17, 18-year-old Robert getting ready to go into and do infantry and artillery and things, what advice would you give knowing what you know now to that young man?
Well, there's 2 pieces of advice I'd give, right? First one is, like I said, don't be afraid to get out there and learn new things, right? Just go do it. The advice I got that really put me on the path was the only difference between me and you is you've done it and I haven't. That is it.
That was
the
great.
best advice I got. The second piece of advice I give is basic training. The worst thing you're going to have to do is push-ups, so go enjoy it. Once I learned that, basic training got so much fun. Right.
I actually enjoyed it too. Like boot camp was awesome. Like I didn't mind it. It was like the entry. It was new stuff. But I think that's great.
Push-ups every day. So go in there and have a good time. Because what are they gonna yell at you while you do push-ups? Or
right.
Else while you do push-ups?
They're not gonna kill you, or at least we don't think they will.
That'd be the advice I'd give. I probably would have had a lot more fun in basic training sooner.
Yeah.
Instead of after realizing, well, shit, all I gotta do is a few more push-ups or butterfly kicks. Okay. So
whenever you take the power out of the discipline tool, right?
That's it. So that's the advice I give anybody going into the military. Just you're gonna do push-ups.
It's gonna happen. Yep, they're gonna make it rain in the dorms and all that other is gonna happen.
Do your job, but have
exactly. I love it. And then one final thing. So obviously you're busy. But is there a best way for people to connect with you? Are you on LinkedIn at all a little bit?
I am on LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn. I check my messages every now and then. I don't have any other social media.
Smart man.
Not a social media guy. I don't do that stuff. You had to pull teeth just to get me on this, so you already know.
I wasn't going to throw you under the bus like that.
Yeah, I'll tell everybody, this was a long time coming. But all my friends are going to know. They're going to be like, I can't believe you got him to do this. But yeah, LinkedIn, message me on LinkedIn. I check that pretty often. My work email is on there. I don't take my phone numbers on there because you get a lot of robocalls. But definitely, reach
So
out.
so LinkedIn, shoot you a LinkedIn message, connection
Definitely.
request is okay, and they can kind of learn a
Absolutely.
little bit more, basically.
Yep, for sure. And anybody that wants any mentorship, I mean, if you're in the military, whether you're prime power or not, if you're watching this and you just want some advice on, how to be better than the person next to you,
Absolutely.
reach out. None of us got here by ourselves. None of us.
Absolutely. And I like just be a force for good and try to share it and do it. And we're the same way, man. That's the way it should be. And I greatly appreciate it.
But just know
And then
I'm
if
going to be
somebody's
here.
interested in PES, what's the website for you guys there?
Oh, yeah. www.pe-svcs.com.
There
Go
you
on
go.
there. We've got to contact us. It'll come to us. We do have a careers page. It links back to Quanta Careers. So you'll see a lot of open jobs across Quanta. But honestly, the best way is just get on there and LinkedIn message somebody, and anybody that works at PES, they'll get you in touch with whoever they need to get you in touch with. And, don't be afraid to have a conversation.
Unless
Explore
you're
the,
in need of 3 or 4, reach out to me.
that's, yeah, gotta get that, get a little off the top, right? Can I compete with you on here? Is that what I'm
Kidding.
supposed to be
I'm
doing?
kidding. I like him. Even if you didn't want to go straight to me, go see Robert.
Yeah, that's right. No, I mean, it's a dog eat dog world out there.
Yeah.
It definitely is. We're looking as everybody's looking. We're going to be doing some growth, just like everybody else is trying to do some growth. So if you want to come be part of a team that's going to push you to do more and hopefully surround you with people who are better than you, and you want to make something better and an impactful change, that's what we're offering.
I think that's a phenomenal way to end the conversation there, man. And I do truly appreciate what you're doing to build the culture over there. And you and I, for the audience here, we've known each other going on almost a year now, I think, and probably talk at least a couple of times a month at this point. And I wouldn't represent them. I wouldn't represent you, just like I fire clients on a fairly regular basis if they're not performing and the candidate feedback's not there and we're not having those issues at all with PES. And I think a large reason is due to your leadership over there. So keep killing it, man. I think you're doing great things.
Appreciate all your help, man. It's been good.
No, it's definitely a ride, and we'll keep on rocking and rolling here. And I am finally got to have the conversation after all this time. So
It's been
I'll beat
long,
on you
man.
a little bit,
It's
but
been
no,
long.
man, it was packed full of great stuff. And I'll be hitting up Prime Power alumni here in the backside and let them know we finally got it knocked out, so they can
Oh,
kind of
I'm sure
start
they're
giving you a
waiting.
hard time.
They're not going to believe it. Yeah, I'm so embarrassed. It was a weak moment, guys. It was a weak moment.
All
Yeah.
right, folks. Well, that was a phenomenal one again, Robert. Thank you so much. And until next time, Mike
Take it
out.
easy, man.